Welcome to No Longer Conformed. I'm Erik Garthe, and we are studying the source of success, building character in your life. In this session, we'll be looking at Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 5, resourcefulness. Why did God promise to deliver his people from the bondage of Egypt and then lead them into the wilderness with no water or food? God desires an intimate fellowship with his people. When God led the nation of Israel into the wilderness, he wanted their needs to draw them close to him for intimate fellowship. Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 2, "And you shall remember that your Lord your God led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you and test you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not." During their 40 years in the wilderness, God provided for their needs as they trusted in him. He told Moses in Exodus 16, verses 11 and 12, that he wanted them to know that I am the Lord your God. God also demonstrated in Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 4 his power and provision by preventing their clothes and shoes from wearing out or becoming too small. God's number one challenge with the nation of Israel was to keep their focus on him. He warned them not to forget him, and even revealed the fact that they would become proud and not need him after they built houses, accumulated possessions, and had all their physical needs supplied. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 11 down to verse 14. "Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full, and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, when your heart is lifted up and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage." God desires a close relationship with each one of us and wants us to depend on him for everything we need. He urges us to tell him every detail of our needs in prayer. Philippians 4:6. When we experience needs, God wants our hearts to be turned toward him, acknowledging our need for his intervention. Crying out to God in fervent prayer demonstrates our unconditional surrender to him and reveals our confidence in a power greater than ourselves. Resourcefulness is making use of that which others would normally overlook or discard. A resource is something that is available for anticipated needs. The biblical concept of resourcefulness is to gather. Proverbs 13 and verse 11 reads, "Wealth gained by dishonesty will be diminished, but he who gathers by labor will increase." In this verse, the Hebrew word for gathers is gabatz, which literally means to grasp. Another Hebrew word for gathers is agar, meaning to harvest. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 5, "He who gathers in summer is a wise son. He who sleeps in harvest is a son who causes shame." God uses physical needs to motivate us to a daily dependence on him. That's why he instructs us to pray. In Matthew 6:11, "Give us this day our daily bread." Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 and 8, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened." The goal of increasing our resources is not to pile up treasures for ourselves, but to increase our ability to give to others. The goal of increasing our resources is just that, being able to give. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. Just consider two examples of resourcefulness and see how they see how they preserved life. Resourcefulness, first of all, was demonstrated during the flood. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 19 and verse 21, after Noah determined to judge the world after God determined to judge the world with a flood, he instructed Noah to build an ark to preserve his family and all the creatures that could not swim. In addition to preparing the space needed to house the animals, Noah and his family had to demonstrate resourcefulness by gathering the food that was needed to survive. Genesis 6, verse 19, and of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you, that they shall be male and female. Verse 21, and you shall take for yourself of all food that is eaten, and you shall gather for yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them. So resourcefulness was demonstrated during the flood. Resourcefulness was also demonstrated during a famine. Genesis 41, verses 35 to 36. Another example was the preparation made for a famine during the days of Joseph. Through a dream, God warned Pharaoh that there would be 7 years of abundant harvest, followed by 7 years of famine. Joseph resourcefully designed a plan to prepare for the famine. In Genesis 41, verses 35 and 36, and let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming, and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Then that food shall be as a reserve for the land of the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land may not perish during the famine. Believers today are instructed to establish habits of resourcefulness to be able to help the needy. Romans chapter 12, verse 13. Also, look at 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 1 and 2. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given orders to the churches of Galatia, so you must do also. On the first day of the week, let each one of you lay up something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. However, there's a danger to be aware of regarding resourcefulness. As resources are increased through creative gathering, it's easy to convince ourselves that we're the ones responsible for the added wealth. We must remind ourselves that it's God who gives you power to get wealth. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 18. James chapter 1, verse 17. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. How resourceful are you? Do you keep track of the resources God has given you? Do you watch for valuable resources others are discarding? As your riches increase, is your motive to give more away? Have you asked God for things without seeking to find them? Building character in your life is what God wants for each one of us as we grow spiritually to maturity. And building character in your life is the source of success in this Christian walk. You think about all these things, these character qualities, and how they apply, and to be diligent to build them in your life, and you have a great day.